Right now, somebody is praying for the fourth time today, not because they want to, because they have to. Because if they don't, the thought comes back. The one that says they've done something unforgivable. The one that says God can't love them anymore. The one that feels less like anxiety and more like the truth. Most people call that a spiritual problem, but it's not. It's OCD. And the cruel, devastating irony is that it almost always attacks the people who care the most about their faith. Today, I'm sitting down with Justin Hughes, a wonderful therapist and author who specializes in exactly this, religious OCD, also called scrupulosity. And what we're going to talk about today is going to challenge almost everything you've been told about these thoughts. Because the common belief is that if you're having these dark, blasphemous, or terrifying thoughts about God, something must be really wrong with you. Therefore, you just pray more, you confess more, you seek reassurance, you try harder, but it never works. And there's a very specific reason why. In this episode, we're going to talk about all things scrupulosity, religious OCD, and name the faith-based thoughts that people are too ashamed to say out loud. We will explain exactly why every strategy you've tried has made it worse and show you exactly what actually leads you through to recovery. Now, if you've been suffering with scrupulosity, alone in silence, convinced you're spiritually broken, this episode of Your Anxiety Toolkit is exactly for you. So thank you, Justin, for coming on again. I love when you share specifically about how people can manage these really painful, shameful, intrusive thoughts. I know you have a book coming out, which I cannot wait to hear and read. But can you first walk me through that moment? Maybe someone's sitting at church, maybe they're praying, or maybe they're just driving their car, and all of a sudden they do have this intrusive thought or feeling. What's actually happening in their brain at that point?
Yes, it's so great to be here, Kimberly. The common experience of intrusions can come up for a variety of reasons, but some of the most common examples that I hear on the faith side, though I work with a broad range of people, can be thoughts like, am I doing this right? Maybe it's a conversation that they're replaying in their head, a thought about, did I mislead that person? Did I say what was truly honest or what I was actually thinking or feeling in the moments? And then they'll go back and replay those situations or have a thought more directly about faith or morality or responsibility. Sometimes this shows up in simple reflections on taking a test or a quiz for students, thinking of the moments that they looked over just to rest their eyes from their exam and they remember seeing the paper of somebody else, and other moments too where it's more direct to their faith that I didn't have the right heart, I didn't have the right posture. What if I was actually angry and rejecting towards God? And these are all just really tangible day-to-day examples that come up so frequently and so commonly.
Yeah, so what you're really saying is people who tend to be genuinely moral, good human beings, their intrusive thoughts attack that so directly in these little nuanced ways, like just in the little day-to-day activities, which makes them feel like they have done something really wrong or they are a bad person. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, so I'll give a little bit of a caveat to that. So I think that that's a great way. It's the important starting point to look at it. So when we say that it attacks what we love, and oftentimes it's the counterpoint of the person's very heart. Yes, absolutely, from the intrusive standpoint. And so when we pull in faith beliefs and actual teachings of the church, for example, we would, for Christians particularly, we're going to look at no one is good but God alone. Now, here's the problem. If people rush into some judgmental condemnation, fill in the blank mindset, they're already on the wrong path with these things. Because first of all, that's not that's not what the answer would be from a Christian ethic standpoint anyway, is some self-flagellation, beating oneself up. In that, that's more reliance on the person rather than God. But then back to the point of the intrusion, that's just one of the most important things, I think, in early conversations for me to emphasize and to teach that, hey, this can be completely against your wishes. Like we can both uphold the theological teaching and belief, and also that this thing is very much against your wishes. This thing is very much against what your otherwise character would be. And so that's a little bit of how I'd put that, but I think it's landing at that starting place that's so essential for the beginning of OCD treatment.
Can you tell me more about that? Like, I really want to understand more about what you just said. I mean, and I'm not someone who I think understands the scriptures like you do. Tell me more about, because when I see clients who are struggling with scrupulosity, they are trying to be good. They are trying to have good thoughts. They are trying to have good feelings, pure intentions, good behaviors, like a lot of this good and bad, shame, like black and white thinking. But tell me more about what you were talking about in terms of
Mm-hmm.
God being the good.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So some people came up to Jesus when he was teaching. This was recorded. Gospels, can't remember which one. And they said, "Good teacher." And it's interesting because he paused and reflected. He said, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone." Now, critics of scripture and Christianity will say, see, Jesus is clearly at this moment saying that he's not good, or that's a trash reading of that passage. That's not what that's all saying. So a theologian could put this better, but as I read it, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, like, why would you do this? Why would you call me good? Because if you see that only God is good, and when we think of Christian teaching, we're going to teach on topics like sin. We're going to talk about separation from God. And I realize that maybe a majority of your listeners may not, actually, I don't know necessarily. There's many listeners that are not going to be Christian. So by the way, if you're on here, thank you so much. I hope you'll bear with me. I've got a lot of stuff that applies to everybody. But talking about this specific aspect of what we believe and teach from a Christian doctrine standpoint is that man is not good apart from God, apart from God's grace, apart from God's intervention. And so when clients come into session and they talk about these things, it's one of the things that creates this huge gap if they go to someone who's not a Christian or doesn't share their faith, because they show up and they say, well, I'm such a terrible person. I'm really, really bad. And then the counselor may say, well, no, you're not. It's like, you're a wonderful person. You're a really good person. Look at these intentions. They're so pure. Well, automatically, that's actually going to go against Christian teaching on that topic. But what the counselor who's specialized particularly in ERP is trying to get at, and in KQ, we're friends, and I have so many friends that have different backgrounds and work with a variety of beliefs. I really respect my colleagues that are doing great work in that. And if a Christian walks in and they're really, really, if they're not able to read between the lines of what a person is saying with that, hey, this is against, intrusive to your values and your wishes, the person will very quickly dismiss all of it if they get like a sense or just like a smell, just like almost like the sniff test of, wait a second, that doesn't line up with what I'm being taught in church. In Isaiah, it says, all my righteous deeds are as filthy rags, which the concept is God is holy. And so like ultimately it's through God and by God that I can do anything that is good. But also, total side note too, there's variations in theological teaching. Like I land really strongly on all of us share, I believe, the image of God, the imago Dei in Latin. And so that means there's going to be amazing, great stuff. And I'm also not going to bat an eye. However, a lot of my Christian colleagues that are more in the church or ministry realm wouldn't like the wording of it. Like if a person is like, yeah, I think I have good intentions, yeah, you're always going to find that person that's just almost the hellfire and brimstone, like nobody has good intention. No, like I think that there can be really good things. But the whole theological point that I'm going to come back to, that so many Christians I think get invalidated when they go to a therapist, is that from a belief standpoint, it's going to say only God is good, and it's but for his grace that I have goodness in me. So both the general image of God and then also more specific. So slide that over to exposures and OCD. What does that look like? I want to talk about that, but I need to pause because
wait, yeah, you have to pause,
yes.
because I think you've just taught me something I did not know. Like I feel like it's very rare when I have a guest on where I'm like completely gobsmacked, and I'm completely gobsmacked.
Okay.
Let's roll back. Let's roll back to everybody listening. We are learning in real time. So, like, Justin,
Which
you
is
are
the best.
taking me on a journey right now. So wait, I have been making some mistakes with my clients. Let's address that. So from a compassion standpoint, I think I have made that mistake by restructuring that they are good people, right? You know, we do it just once. It's not like we do it repetitively. Because remember, when we're doing, for folks listening, and if you've taken your OCD Toolkit, the course we have for OCD, we're always talking about your exposures and response prevention should line up with your values, right? It should line up with your faith. It should line up with what you believe true. But if I, Kimberly, the therapist, are coming to restructure, like, your thoughts don't mean anything about you, does that still ring true in the circumstance? Because I'm over here teaching thoughts are neither good nor bad, they're neutral, right? That your feelings are neither good nor bad, nor neutral, and your thoughts don't mean anything about you, and that your OCD will often attack what you value. Is that correct wording for the person with these obsessions if they are Christian?
So a lot of that, I think, is extraordinarily helpful. Oh, we're doing a deep dive here. So,
No, don't be afraid to school me here, because I feel like this is important for my followers to listen, because this is the messaging I give and I want to make sure it's correct.
and I love your perspective and attitude with that. So let's look at one of the key problems that shows up in OCD. It's known as thought action fusion, or oversignificance of thoughts. And so with that, it is unfairly joining together, fusing. So in ACT terms, there's that cognitive fusion, but in cognitive distortion terms, oversignificance of thoughts, thought action fusion. And one of the things the Christian faith teaches is thoughts are important and beliefs are important. And so oftentimes one of the very first concerns that's levied in the process by many that I work with, and then when I talk to others who are going to other counselors, is but thoughts, intent, all of these things matter. And so I do want to get people to the place quickly where they can recognize that a thought can just be a thought. So as to some of the thoughts, I think that is the right thing. That is the accurate thing that we all need to be doing. Is it possible that I can have just the thoughts that in the messiness of my brain and this world and fill in the blank, I could just be having a conversation with somebody, having a great time, and then just have a thought of stabbing them? And can it literally mean nothing? Yes. Nothing other than I have intrusive thoughts or OCD or whatever else. It's so key. And that actually was one of the key hallmarks in my own growth as a therapist, in especially the early days. And when I first started to specialize in OCD, it was a necessary hoop to jump through, was to grapple with, okay, what does this mean? Now, different belief systems and approaches teach some very different things in relation to thoughts and beliefs. And oftentimes I hear a lot of those fears from people. They're like, oh, but we can't just dismiss this. Or does this mean that you're approaching it, from some other religious perspective, or fancy term is syncretism, that you're just pulling in all these different things and you're invalidating faith, and fill in the blank. So questions, I think that this is one of the absolute hallmark things to get down and get right in the treatment process. And then also from the faith standpoint. So make a comment and pause. As to thoughts, there's even been some research. Dr. Jonathan Abramowitz has been part of research, Dr. Jed Sieve, all related to what sort of things become more of a struggle for different religious beliefs and systems. And so Christians will really, really struggle with the thought action fusion very commonly because of this emphasis that thoughts matter. And so as a clinician, and by the way, this is going to be true for Muslim clients as well, or multiple different faiths, but thoughts also matter in Islam. And so if I'm working with a Muslim client, I'm going to make sure that I'm respecting that as well. So from the Christian teaching standpoint, we teach that both worship or sin, wrongdoing, missing the mark, can be at that level of thought, and can be, and certainly relates to belief. And so it is really, really important to be able to emphasize, hey, like, I understand this is actually the teaching, and I'll emphasize different scriptures. And then for me, because I do the integration with the clients who are interested, and bless me to do that. I don't force it on anybody. It's pretty neat to be able to be like, hey, by the way, like, I think this is important too. I'm not
Yeah.
here at all to dismiss that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense. I think that the base level of what you're getting at is precisely what needs to happen with OCD. But for the Christian client particularly, I think that a wording change could help. Hey, like, and that's like the ultimate uncertainty, right? Like, maybe there are some thoughts there that mean something, but can we agree that there could be thoughts that are very against your wishes, against what you want? It's a false signal. And that's what I'm also going to do early on, is try to come to some agreement, not to necessarily put it in a clear box with those things, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Okay, so I really appreciate this. I'm constantly thinking through the lens of me supervising my staff. I have 6 incredible therapists who work with me, and how I can absolutely be the best supervisor for them, and a teacher for all of my students. So I would love if you could walk me through, and I actually would love for you, we can go as deep as you like here, but walk me through and walk us, students of yours, through what do you do if you have a thought, like in real time? What would you encourage as a Christian ERP therapist? And this could be for Christians specifically or other religions as well. It's up to you. But like, what do we do in the moment? Can you walk me through some steps on what is helpful for Christian or religious folks when they have a thought or feeling that completely does not line up with their values?
Put me in, coach. I love this.
And we're in the dugout and we're going out onto the field, I think is the saying now.
Yeah, absolutely. So response prevention is a great umbrella. And also, I think there's things even outside of response prevention proper. So I'll explain briefly. So the main go-to gold standard treatment for OCD is exposure and response prevention. And it's now used actually for other things too. It's finding a great basis in the treatment of eating disorders. And so anyway, it's not just limited to OCD, but it was created for. Interesting enough, it's the one thing that was created for OCD. Everything else was just kind of incidental, like SSRIs and so forth. But with that, we have I'm facing the thing that's uncomfortable, and I'm doing it systematically, intentionally. And I remove or block or keep myself from engaging in the compulsion. Now, easier said than done. What does it look like to do nothing? Because essentially that's what the response prevention is. There's a lot of ways to facilitate that. And so I actually have this, I can include it if you would like. It's my big response prevention guide in book. I list out tools and skills, but I also have ebook too that I can get you hooked up with for free. I think just like an obsession, and I may have a different take on this, but I think that it can be pretty much anything. The compulsion could be pretty much anything. And so sometimes the best response prevention is just a really good exposure. Like, did I just swear at God? Maybe. And then keep driving that car. Send that text message. Maybe is actually diffusion. So diffusion's maybe, maybe not, could be, okay. So cognitive fusion, that this must be important, giving this attention. If it must not be important, then diffusion is so great because it's okay. Yeah, sure, definitely, maybe, could be. Now, people will quickly raise their hand or try to leave if they think that they're going to be encouraged in having bad thoughts. There's a couple of people that I recommend their resources in their books, but many of my clients are very scared off by when they get into the middle of their books, and they're just talking about how matter of fact one can be with doing an exposure script, for example, facing their fears. So back to what a person can do instead, it's technically everything that's opposite of what one does, everything that's different in quality from what one does in the context of fear when they fall into the compulsion. But we have to look out because even exposures themselves can start to become compulsive. Am I feeling lower distress? Did I habituate after that would be a great example of that. So, and I can go into more detail of other response prevention techniques.
I have a question. So we want exposure and response prevention to be in line with their values. So if they have the thought, did I just pray to the devil and not to God? If that's their thought, or, did I want to sin, or did I sin, or did I say something out loud, or, did I have a negative thought while taking communion? Like it could be any of those thoughts. In that moment, let's say, okay, let's work it out. You're in church. It's the holiest of times, or you're at the temple, wherever you are. It's the time you have made in your week to worship God. So it feels intense and purposeful, and there's a bit of pressure there, right? And let's say you do have that thought. So you're saying, and this is what we do too, but you can really put your nuance into it. So you're saying we don't need to do the old school ERP would be like, well, no, purposely have a thought against God or purposely,
Yeah, exactly.
we
Start
don't
tearing
do
up your Bible,
yeah, we don't do that anymore, but we practice saying maybe or just doing nothing at all, right?
Okay, so what I do is I default to the plan, and I do use a hierarchy. It's a really filled out digital form of this. And I have been using the phrase, I like this recently, we'll see if it sticks, respect the hierarchy. And so if that person is going to church and it's this special moment, it's a holy moment, maybe it's right before receiving communion or the Eucharist, maybe it's a high holiday, Easter, fill in the blank. First of all, back to what you were talking about earlier, that's where that really does apply. That of course, if we raise the stakes on when is going to be the worst time for me to have really bad thoughts, it's probably about now. So it makes a lot of sense. That would be the moment of struggle. And so I work with what can the person do with quality skill. So if the person gets slammed with their level 10 exposure, then it's important to say, well, what can I do? What have I done so far? And sometimes it may even be how I practice it is I tell the person, hey, this may have happened, but work with the one that we're working on in session this week. So it could be something like, I feel anger, and maybe that means that I'm against God. And maybe that's a level 3 out of 10. Whereas the obsession that they just got in the church service was vile words, swear words, sexual obsessions, something like that. They see a crucifix and they think of Jesus naked. Like maybe they're slammed with a level 10. I don't want that person. I mean, basically, people are like, but what do I do in this situation? And now I just look at people and I say, I'm sorry, it's going to be messy. That's hard. Do your best. You don't yet have the skills to pay the bills when it comes to those situations. So what you can do is go back to what you have. So maybe that's an exposure script at that point, that immediately when that happens, the person shifts to a different exposure, which interestingly enough is actually response prevention in that moment, because it's not trying to figure out, why did I think of naked Jesus? It's, okay, I'm sitting here, and it's, yes, unfortunate in the moment with the suffering, maybe that person does pass communion or the participation because instead they're sitting to journal in their notebook. But if it's intentional and planned and it's part of it, it's part of what helps for freedom to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do some business with this. I'm tired of being bossed around by this thing, and I'm going to work on my skills. So maybe it's that level 3 script. And then, of course, they're going to have a harder time. It's not just going to magically disappear, but at least they've practiced 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever of that skill that they know how to do, or developing maybe with a therapist or apart from. And then it becomes all the more motivation if those things are coming up often or frequently to say, hey, now we got to work quicker, to work higher. And I don't require that people do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's pretty old school also. But I do that in the early stages where it's like, hey, like don't make a leap from a 3 to a 10, maybe a 3 to a 5. Like if you have the skill, if you can do it with lowered compulsions or no compulsions, great. That's fine.
Right. So just to add, a client or a student listening so they've done the script, they've practiced the thought diffusion, they've given themselves permission for it to be messy if they are having a 10 out of 10. But then it is time to do communion, or it is time to sing a hymn or pray in the community of the church. And then that person struggles to engage back in that faith-based action, let's say it's praying, without it becoming compulsive. What would you suggest for those folks who are trying to resist the compulsive behavior? Maybe it feels very habitual. They're trying to practice response prevention, but the compulsion is kind of interfering with their faith action, their faith community action.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of the quick reference points and platitudes are just that. We have to really personalize. And one of the reasons that I'm just such a big believer in doing this in community, and frankly, getting therapists, like there's just something very, very different about the personalized. And as much as I'm a fan of self-help and books, you've written some great ones yourself, KQ. I've got one coming out. There's nothing that quite matches sitting down and being with another who can get it and help guide through it. So that being said, there's with a lot of nuance here. On the faith practice side, there are going to be some things that are threshold items that even if there are compulsions out one's ears, they may still choose to engage in that. For example, one of the things that we don't do with food-related obsessions is tell people to stop eating for 30 days while they get their treatment down and have a non-compulsive relationship to food. It has to be a both and, of course. And this is one of the things that is easy to miss. And me too. Like, as I'm coming in here talking about these things, I'm also not highlighting, my own challenges and mistakes along the way. So I want to be really, really clear about this, that it's not like, oh man, that Christian dude got the mic and now he's just on blast with every. No. Like, I'm making so many mistakes in this process and not walking congruently or respecting other, things at different points. So we're all in this boat. If we're learning, like if you don't want to learn, if you don't want to grow, well, I have a different issue with you, but not you, KQ.
No, I'm always so happy I always say to people, like, challenge me. Like, that's where I learn.
Well, and also, if I can give this validation at this moment, Kimberly, you are the person that has modeled that the most to me in the sphere of therapist, author, podcaster, because I don't think that is mirrored very often. And even just a moment ago, like I gobsmacked. Yes, I love those. Is that an Australianism coming out, or? It's good. I don't usually hear people in the States say gobsmacked.
Oh, okay. So no, maybe it is. I'm so American and I'm so mixed up between the two cultures at this point. So
thank you for
of course.
leaning into the lighting.
I love this. So you're saying, I think we hear what you're saying, but again, challenge me, is if you came to pray and your OCD is helping you or encouraging you or pushing you to engage in compulsions, don't not pray out of the wish to response prevention. Still try to pray. And try not to engage in those, and maybe flip-flop and teeter-totter between your praying and your script and your uncertainty statements or non-engagement in statements, and still engaging in your church. Like, we don't want to avoid the church because you might do a compulsion at church. Would you agree with that response?
Largely, the recommendations can change with really high severity. And so, actually, well before I understood OCD, I was trained at a clinic, and they worked with patients who had OCD. They didn't specialize in it, but it was a lot of general mental health, anxiety, depression, intensive outpatient day programming, day hospital programming. And I remember that one of the things that kind of shocked me, coming out of seminary, but trained as a state licensed therapist as well, was when the head psychiatrist had told somebody to cease a specific spiritual practice for 30 days. They actually told them, hey, for part of your treatment, I don't want you going to church in the next 30 days. Now, that's where a lot of people are like, see, this is, I told you, these people are the devil, these therapists, these, fill in the blank, they're recommending against. Well, here's the thing. There is no singular passage. There's not like a command to follow of, I need to be actively in church for 4 weeks straight. And so this is where we have some flexibility. Now, however, we need to be very careful about a prohibition on total prayer. We actually, there's ways to kind of game it in the sense that sometimes gets people's buy-in to say, hey, I need you to prove to me that you're not compulsively praying. So I would like you to figure out a way that you can do it where you are confident that this is not a compulsion, and then share it with me, and we'll just kind of run it past together, and I'll share some insights that I have. And the sooner you get there, the more and it's not up to me, it's up to you, the Lord, but I'm going to feel good about blessing, so to speak, like your re-engagements with whatever it is that you had to take a pause. So there are moments to take a pause, especially with higher severity, so that a person, much like with addictions, getting space from something that they haven't yet figured out. I don't know if this home environment is awful for me, but I think I need 30 days, 60 days to kind of figure this out. I don't know if, right now there's actually a faith problem of which I should examine myself and not take communion or Eucharist, but I sure have a lot of reasons to believe the compulsions are kicking my butt. So in that case, what usually it's kind of a day-by-day thing. It can even just be in traditional outpatient therapy to be like, hey, can you pause this for a moment so that you have the space to do the work? This week, would you actually skip going to church? See what happens there.
Yes, and I was literally just about to ask you that. And that's the model that I have used is I don't need you to stop. I need you to have practice not going once so that you can learn that you can tolerate not going once or not getting communion once. So it's not black and white. And I think that is where religion can get so confused, because sometimes it feels like it's black and white. Sometimes clients will say like, no, it literally says in the Bible, like it has to be this way. And OCD,
pray without ceasing. That's a
Yeah.
great example.
And
Yeah.
then OCD will come in and be like, you cannot, like, and that gets so confusing, right? And that's where so much nuance is required in this treatment.
Yeah, that's right. Nuance is a good word. And I think of how relational it is. I've been pondering these past couple of years how much even evidence-based practices that are high power, super impactful, really effective, that still the basic building block is relationship. Like we've got to engage and build trust and rapport with clients. If we don't have that, we're gonna clearly run into problems. And that's I think where that personalization comes in, where we actually have a relationship with the person who's sitting before us to really get to know them, and not just parroting something that was on Instagram or that I just posted on Instagram. Like that's the thing. Like I'm so torn sometimes, just social media presence, because it has to be so pithy, it has to be so like black and white, and thoughts are thoughts are thoughts are thoughts. I agree with that 100%. I dropped that post recently, and yet to work with the person, to work with the nuance that's there. I think it's so important that people hear and also can just understand the more that they listen to a podcast like yours, for example, and the more they come across great training. OCD SoCal's got some great stuff going on right now. And then maybe it's the international conference in the summer, like to hear that, okay, wait a second, there's another way to do this. And what's being suggested doesn't have to work against my faith. And it also doesn't have to work against me. I can show up, I can grow both in a, just an emotional, behavioral sense, but it can also grow in my faith, which is a big passion of mine, not just to be like, okay, well, you got these faith beliefs that are making a slow down assessment, but fine, okay, whatever, I guess we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
No, like to say, hold on, actually some of the most successful cases that I've seen and treated are very much because of their faith, and putting treatment on steroids, as it were, to say, let's go. Like it's not just some necessity of, I guess we got to talk about it because the person won't shut up. No, it's we have this opportunity to get to know the whole person, body, mind, spirit. Biopsychosocial spiritual is another way of thinking of it. And then obviously as clinicians who work with state licensures in diversity, and which I love, we're going to also need to be at that place where a person can say, that is silly. That stuff doesn't have any importance to me. And the cool thing is the evidence-based treatment is powerful enough to get most people where they need to go with reducing dysfunction, reducing the suffering that's in their life.
Right. Let's bring this home. If there is one core message you want to give to someone with scrupulosity or religious OCD, what would that be?
So I think that I'll put it this way. What if it's easier than you think? It could be easier. God could be way more gracious in this than you think. God's ways are not our ways. And so where I have a tendency to beat the crap out of myself, what if he's smiling kindly? And then what about the areas where I want to go easy on myself and eat that full sleeve of Oreos, and God's not shouting down or throwing down lightning bolts, but also like, hey, I've got deeper, richer, more beautiful things. What if it's easier? That's just kind of the thought that comes to me today.
Wow. That's really beautiful. I love that. I truly love that. That lands for me. So thank you. Not what I was expecting. So thank you.
Absolutely. And same here, where we've gone. And I think it's just a reflection of, and one of the things that you do really well is to just get into the space of not just following a script. Like we don't have a script here today. That's that relational piece. And I think that that's a big part of the answer, no matter which way we look at it, and a big part of both in therapy and in community. And it's showing up, it's being with people. And I'm just so encouraged by how you approach these things, as I learned from you as well.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell us about where people can hear more about you.
Yes, my website is the main hub, justinkhughs.com. So you can go to my /blog, find out about the book, and yeah, just the go-to spot. I'll send a couple of things that you can send out to your listeners with free ebooks and stuff like that if interested.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Truly, what a gift for me on a Tuesday morning to sit with you and be a student. I love it so much. So thank you.
May we always be in the student role.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
for
thank you.
real. Thank you.
Absolutely.